At my daughter-in-law's wedding, she discovered the incredible truth behind my $50,000 dress. The heavy silk cascaded down like a waterfall as Mary Thompson stood before the mirror, the pristine white gown shimmering under the vintage lights. It had taken her breath away. This was the wedding dress that could have draped royalty. Instead, it was hers at least. That's what she told herself. Her heart thrummed a dissonant rhythm of pride and doubt. A gift from the man who had vanished from her life, and the lives of her children decades ago. The chaos of the day loomed like a cloud dripping with anticipation. Her son Jake had left the ceremony preparations, heading to the rustic church with Jessica and her lavish socialite mother, eager for the spotlight. Meanwhile, Mary, a simple hairdresser known for her warm demeanor, wrestled with the enormity of her father's extravagant token. Would wearing it earn her acceptance or elicit scorn from Jessica's side? It felt like dancing on a wire stretched between humble beginnings and a fortune thrust upon her with strings attached. Mary's fingers trembled as she recalled the last encounter with her father, the eccentric millionaire who had returned out of nowhere. Behind the wealth lay an overwhelming pressure. The promise of reconciliation mingled with unwelcome conditions. A desperate plea had come with the dress, a condition that left her insides twisted, inextricably linking her worth to the price tag. She closed her eyes and the dress felt heavy, the fabric whispering judgments from the depths of her conscience. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A knock broke her reverie, startling her. It was Jessica, radiant in her anticipation but with an edge of scrutiny. "Mom, are you ready? We don't want to keep everyone waiting." The words echoed, drumming against Mary's heart, reminding her of the scrutiny awaiting her at the church. "Yeah, just a minute," she replied, straightening her back as she fended off the rising tide of anxiety. Mary sensed Jessica's mother drifting behind a hawk circling, ready to swoop down at the slightest falter. The soft rustle of the dress felt like a betrayal, a chasm of guilt opening within her. How could she embrace this beauty, while cradling the complexities of her lineage? Each thread wove not just luxury but torment into the very fabric of her identity, a lopsided inheritance, wrapped tightly with expectations. Mary looked down, imagining the whispers it would conjure, the raised eyebrows from the guests who would underestimate her humble roots. Would they judge her worth by her father's wealth, by an existence she had fought to escape? As the ceremony got underway, the air thickened with unspoken tension. The church's wooden pews creaked beneath the weight of societal eyes, and Mary carried not just a dress but the burden of acceptance. Would she fracture under the pressure, or find a way to stand proud against the judgment? The thought pierced her, leaving no easy exit. Now, as vows were exchanged and her family stood on the brink of a new chapter, a gnawing uncertainty gripped her heart. This dress was not merely a fabric, but a tether to a past she couldn't leave behind. Would the unveiling of an old family secret rip through the wedding's sanctity, further complicating her delicate dance on this tightrope? She took a deep breath, time hanging thick in the air, waiting for the moment to unearth the tangled web of her history. As Mary stood there, clenching the delicate fabric with a blend of desperation and hope, she realized the fight for belonging may come at a price, and today that price could reshape everything she valued. The preacher's voice echoed through the church, blending with the whispers of the guests and amplifying Mary's internal turmoil. Each vow exchanged resonated within her, stark reminders of the ties binding her to both the past and an uncertain future. As she watched Jake and Jessica, lost in their moment, a knot formed in her throat. She stood at the periphery, an island of history amid a sea of new beginnings. With every heartfelt promise declared, Mary grappled with her identity. She felt the weight of the silk dress, its extraordinary value a stark contrast to the unadorned life she had carved out alone. The fear that Jessica's family might see her as an imposter tightened her chest. What if this moment of celebration was merely a stage for her father's wealth to overshadow her sacrifices? The ceremony pressed on, and Mary's mind spiraled through memories. Thoughts of her struggles flooded back, The late nights spent cutting hair to pay bills, the loneliness of her father's absence, the steadfast endurance she had built over the years. It was often the small victories, a child's laughter, a satisfied customer that flared a sense of worth within her. Yet here, enveloped by silk and scrutiny, doubt seeped in like a slow poison, and each passing second threatened to reveal her vulnerabilities. As the couple began their vows, she caught Jessica's mother, Margaret's, discerning gaze. That sharp look burgeoned within Mary, an unspoken challenge accompanying each bright, flashy smile Margaret offered. Could she muster the resolve to deflect judgment, perhaps find a surprising strength that aligned with a daughter-in-law's expectations? The truth within the dress's fabric might expose her inadequacies rather than herald a new prestige. And then a singular thought pierced through the chaos. If she were to wear this dress, it must be worn with intent. The knowledge settled in as her heart raced. She reminded herself of her hard-earned journey, striving always to carve her own definition of success. That wealth should not dictate her legacy. Rather, it was her resilience and skill that defined her. As if in response to this internal awakening, the solemn repetitions of the wedding vows transformed. They morphed into a mantra, echoing what she should declare to herself. She was more than simply a product of her past, an heir to wealth she never wanted. She was a force of nature, a survivor, and this dress, despite its origins, would not determine her value. In an unexpected moment of clarity, Mary stepped forward, her heart racing. All eyes turned to her. She straightened her shoulders, her mind resolute, and spoke in a clear voice that matched her newfound clarity. "I want to share something," she declared, the quiet anticipation in the church enwrapping her like a cocoon. The murmurs surged, heads tilted in intrigue. What do they expect to hear? She pondered for an instant, but she pushed aside the doubt. The truth simmered just beneath the surface, ready to ignite. Today she would reclaim her narrative, shed the shadows of her past, and redefine the relationship she had with both her family and herself. Mary hesitated only for a moment before rousing the courage against the tide of apprehension. She stared at her son and soon-to-be daughter-in-law, her heart pounding like a drum roaring for attention. "This is not just a dress," she began. "It's a testament to choices, to my journey, and what it means to embrace who you truly are." The air thickened with a palpable energy, as a ripple of curiosity engulfed the congregation. Unraveled threads tangled tightly in her chest, and she felt the dress's weight shift alongside her purpose. Would she unravel the situation further or stitch together her family's fragmented perceptions in this moment? The undeniable power of her voice lingered, and the heavy fabric felt lighter, like airlifting the burden of expectations. "Someone needs to know the real story behind this dress," she continued, her eyes meeting a sea of anticipation. With that single declaration, Mary's foot hovered at the precipice of revelation, ready to plunge into depths she once feared exploring. The audience sat breathless, waiting to know what would surface from not just her past, but from her heart. But was she ready to confront the deepest shadows of her lineage? Mary could feel once again the gnawing question dance in her mind. Would unraveling the truth lead her to liberation or deeper conflict? The moment lingered, charged with uncharted possibilities, brimming with the weight of her soul. As the questions hung in the air, one thing became apparent. The truth had been dormant for too long, and today was the time to bring it to light, come what may. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter," Mary declared, her voice steady as it rang through the stillness of the church. The room held its breath, as if the very walls were eager to absorb her truth. Every gaze was a flame illuminating her fears, yet in that moment, she felt a flicker of courage burn brighter. What began with a thread became a tapestry woven with desire and resolution. This dress, she gestured toward the fabric cascading around her waist, holds stories far beyond its price tag. It symbolizes years of hard work, dreams sacrificed, and barriers overcome. The audience shifted, and Mary could see the intrigue dawning in their eyes. There was no denying the hesitation beneath the surface, but more than that, an electric thrill shot through her, urging her to push forward. She sensed the weight of history beneath her words, her voice wrapping around memories that had burrowed deep within. "I grew up in a world where wealth was considered a measure of worth," she continued, choosing every word like stones she would lay in a foundation. "Yet amidst that abundance I was often alone, learning that value doesn't come from possessions. It emerges from resilience and authenticity, from acknowledging the battles I fought to become who I am today. Margaret's expression flickered between confusion and curiosity, stirring Mary's determination. The challenge that has always sparked doubt in her mind now fueled her fire. In this labyrinth of her lineage, Mary intended to navigate her way through the ruins of expectation and judgment. Her son's eyes widened as she spoke, and sympathy swelled within her chest. She had always protected him from the shadows of her past, but in this moment, she recognized that vulnerability could transform into strength. This might be an opportunity for them both to redefine their narratives, to unearth truths once shrouded in silence. Years ago, Mary remembered, I was just a girl, cutting hair in the basement of our home, dreaming of something more. The nights were long, but I found solace in transforming my clients, just as I hoped to transform my own life. Her grip on the fabric tightened, almost anchoring her to the present, a present she was reclaiming for herself. I made choices, sacrifices, and pursued opportunities that helped build who I am. Each challenge taught me resilience. Each setback, tenacity. She could feel the congregation's breaths aligning with her own heartbeat. It was exhilarating. Powerful, the energy swirling from her words, invoking a new tide of possibilities for her family and herself. As she delved deeper into her narrative, Mary felt the layers of the silk dress echo the layers of her life. She boosted her resolve, understanding that this moment of vulnerability was not merely a revelation but a reformation. I am more than the daughter of a wealthy man. I am a survivor. This dress is a symbol of transformation, a reminder that wealth doesn't define me, my journey does. With each syllable, assurance strengthened within her, palpable and fierce. She could feel the past slip away, replaced by a tangible sense of hope and acceptance of her multifaceted identity. But as she glanced toward Jessica, who was wide-eyed and speechless, an unexpected veil of doubt flickered in Mary's chest. Would her honesty fracture their relationship, or would it fortify the bonds among them? In professing her truth, she realized she must also endure their reactions, the judgments lingering on the periphery. Mary inhaled deeply, preparing to face the unfolding dynamics rather than shying away from them. I stand here today to embrace my own worth, but I also hope to inspire you all to reflect on your own stories. We are more than the roles we fulfill, and this dress should serve as a reminder that each of us defines our value through our choices. The tension in the air became palpable as she finished, and Mary's heart raced wildly. There was no turning back, no retreating into shadows. She had stepped into the light of authenticity, yet her daring revelation came with a heavy question. Could she navigate the tides of their future perceptions, even if she had chosen to expose her truth? As she stood in the silence that followed, anticipating the ripple of her words, a sudden realization struck with unyielding clarity. Unveiling her past bore the weight of promise and peril. Would this vulnerability close doors? Or would it open new ones toward understanding? The hands of fate were undoubtedly in motion. In the silence, she sensed the stirring chaos of a pivotal change. Today, the truth had been set free, but within that freedom, anxiety rippled, the kind that comes just before you find out what others truly think. Would acceptance reign? Or would unanticipated fractures mar her relationships forever? The future loomed ahead, unwritten and ready to confront her choices. As the lingering silence expanded in the space, Mary felt the weight of her unspoken fears pressing against her chest like a heavy cloak. She had laid bare her soul, yet all she could hear was the echo of her own heartbeat. Each pulse resonated with apprehension and excitement, dancing on the thin line between vulnerability and regret. What if they looked upon her differently now? The faces that had once radiated warmth felt momentarily unrecognizable, obscured by the specter of their judgments. Margaret, standing rigid as if she were a statue, became the focal point of Mary's anxiety. Their history wrapped around them, and the flickering candlelight cast shadows that seemed alive with unvoiced questions. Mary, Margaret finally spoke, her voice soft but edged with uncertainty, as if each word required careful selection. Mary leaned in, poised to catch every syllable, desperate for acknowledgement or perhaps validation. This moment would shape their bond, a turning point she couldn't afford to mishandle. In the breath between Margaret's hesitation, Mary confronted her own motives. Why had she chosen this moment, this audience, to claim her truth? Was it courage or mere desperation? Determined to navigate through her personal trepidations, she embraced the challenge of self-reflection. I wanted to show everyone, that our lives are defined by our truths, not our facades, Mary said, cutting through the thick tension hanging in the air. The words spilled forth, fueled by a steadfast resolve to steer the dialogue towards understanding. She caught glimpses of her son's expression, a mixture of pride and concern, and it spurred her onward. The congregation shifted again, whispers cascading like a gentle wave. Mary felt their energy tugging at her, begging for her next move. She refocused, harnessing the rising intensity within. My past has shaped who I am, and I want us all to own our stories, no matter how messy they may seem. But with assertiveness came the recognition that her journey towards acceptance was an evolving process. As her thoughts spiraled, a sense of longing surfaced. She was not merely seeking acceptance from them but was yearning to accept herself wholly, with all its imperfections. Today is not simply about me, she continued, locking eyes with each person in the room. It's about each of you embracing your own path. What burdens do you carry that you hide beneath smiles? What dreams stifle in the shadows of expectation? A wave of discomfort rippled through the crowd, and she sensed the collective grappling with introspection, their personal conflicts emerging to play out in real time. Mary started to feel a thrill rise within her, fueled by the raw potential of connection. Yet, the realization that some might still choose retreat pierced her uplifted spirit. What if their reflections didn't align? Would some see her as a pariah for airing family grievances? The possibility loomed like an unseen adversary, juxtaposed against her burgeoning strength. The subsequent moments became a crucial battle of wills as Mary wrestled with uncertainties, both external and internal. She could choose to retreat now, to pull back into her former self, the dutiful daughter, the silent caretaker, or she could forge ahead and invite them into the depths of her evolution. Setting aside trepidation, Mary took a deep breath, feeling the silk of her dress brush against her skin, a reminder of the sacrifices intertwined in her journey. Gathering her strength, she said, "Love is not a currency of comfort. It's honesty, even when it hurts. I hope our paths merge deeper because I want to understand you as you've watched me shed layers of who I thought I had to be." Just as she finished, a hushed voice broke through the crowd. Jessica finally spoke, her words trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. "But what if we don't like what we find?" Mary felt a sudden rush akin to cold water splashing against her fears. The question hung heavily, an invitation to confront undisclosed truths. It was a call to bravery that could plunge relationships into stark revelations. The next step forward was treacherous, but she realized the potential for growth lay just beyond. As the weight of Jessica's query settled over the atmosphere, Mary prepared to meet the challenge head-on. "Then we must learn to embrace those realities together. For who we truly are is worth knowing." The murmurs surged around her, and in that instant, Mary understood that her journey was not just hers alone. It was a shared tapestry, interwoven with others' stories, identities, and desires. With the air thick with anticipation, she sensed the door to deeper understanding creaking open. Yet, inside her, a flicker of doubt whispered, wondering whether the revelations to come might unravel the delicate web of connection that had begun to form. The reality hung stark. Would they all be ready to face themselves in the mirror? Or would shields rise to protect the fragile armor of their identities? Every heartbeat led toward the unparalleled reckoning ahead. Mary stood on the precipice of transformative confrontation, her spirit intent on forging the path forward. But as she prepared to engage with the answers, she couldn't shake the looming question: what truths would this journey reveal? And at what cost? The silence that followed Jessica's question slid into a tense pause, thickening the air like fog that obscured the landscape ahead. Mary could practically feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. The anticipation was palpable, each set of eyes in the room fixated on her, expecting a response that might redefine her relationships forever. The quiver in her own voice surprised her as she spoke next, attempting to project assurance that she didn't entirely feel. "It's natural to fear the unknown. But imagine the freedom we might find if we could embrace our truths without shame. What if the revelations give us the chance to support one another in ways we never anticipated?" She watched as a flicker of acknowledgement crossed Margaret's face, a break in the stoic facade she had maintained. Yet an internal dialogue whipped through Mary's mind. Was this really the path she wished to walk? The vulnerability required to extend this invitation felt both exhilarating and dangerously naive. The fear operating at the edges of her consciousness amplified, showing her the potential fractures in her relationships and her own self-image. And what if we lose something along the way? Another voice piped up, this one originating from the back of the room. Thomas, a longtime family friend, who had often been a voice of skepticism in her past, posed the challenge with a slight tremor. People often change in ways we can't accept. The room held its breath, and Mary felt her heart race. It was a valid point. The consequences of laying bare their perceptions could indeed lead to rifts. She thought of the intricate tapestry her relationships had woven. One fraught with both affection and unaddressed grudges. Could her truth unravel it? In this dance of courage and doubt, she felt an unsettling urge to retreat, to return to the safety of her previous self. Loss, she began, her voice steadier than before, is part of growth. Just as we shed an old skin to form a new one, we might discover which connections are vital, and which have merely held us back. The resolve in her words ignited a flicker of rebellious hope within her. As the tension wrapped around her like a protective cocoon, she rose to face the collective gaze, standing taller, each breath pushing past her fear. The gathering had been an audience for shadows, but could now transform into a support system for authenticity. If our relationships can withstand this examination, perhaps they will emerge stronger, more vibrant. Mary could barely believe the conviction in her own voice. It was an expression she hadn't known she could summon, akin to uncovering a hidden talent. Even amid uncertainty, she found solace in the reality that she was indeed capable of leading this charge into the unexplored. Look, she continued, there is no light without the dark. We don't have to remain shackled to our fears. We can choose to release each other from the shackles of expectation and embrace the complexity of our lives. A few nods crested the room like waves, signaling that her words had struck a chord, igniting sparks of contemplation among the crowd. Yet doubt still simmered within her. Each affirmation she received felt precious but fleeting, as though they were ghostly reflections in the water, vanishing at any moment. What if we discover things about ourselves we don't like? Margaret's voice trembled, bringing a palpable vulnerability back into the space. Mary met her gaze, recognizing her own hesitations reflected in Margaret's eyes. What if we discover things we don't even know are there? A silence ensued, drawing a collective intake of breaths, as if each person was on the precipice of discovery. Mary grasped this moment of shared vulnerability, something deeper at stake than merely her own fears. It was the authenticity of their intertwined lives they were voicing. Then we confront them together, Mary said softly, feeling an unexpected sense of empowerment swell within her as she locked eyes with Margaret. The air crackled with promise and dread, an unsettled understanding that they were tethered to each other willing or not. With every heartbeat, the walls that had confined her for so long began to feel a little less formidable. But as hope flickered, so too did anxiety that perhaps this was too big a leap. Was she prepared for the shadows lurking beneath the surface of their collective authenticity? Standing on the cusp of revelation, she felt like a diver prepared to plunge into uncertain waters. Would the clarity of the truth silence her fears, or would it plunge them into deeper discord? In that moment, she realized the actual heart of the matter wasn't solely about confronting each other, but confronting herself, the emerging self she had chosen to nurture. And suddenly it became clear. The true challenge lay not just in their ability to unveil secrets, but in her willingness to embrace her evolving identity, one that was far removed from the careful, narrow confines she had inhabited for years. As she took a step forward, propelled by newfound determination, she posed a poignant question that lingered in the air, bold and resonant. What are you willing to uncover about yourselves today? The invitation to explore hung heavy, glimmers of hope interspersed with thickening uncertainty. With the room alive with potential and the stakes high, Mary sensed the journey toward unearthing truths was only beginning, and the path ahead promised to be both tumultuous and transformative. As the weight of her words settled, Mary felt the energy in the room shift. What had begun as a gathering fraught with tension and apprehension morphed into a shared space for exploration and potential transformation. The hesitant nods and murmurs of agreement sparked a sense of community that sent a wave of warmth coursing through her. Yet beneath that warmth simmered a tide of anxiety, a visceral reminder of the vulnerability she had invited into their lives. She could feel her heart beating louder than before, each thud carving out the air with new purpose. This was no longer merely an inner monologue about her own demons. It had metamorphosed into a collective examination of truth, fear, and the fragile threads that connected them as individuals. Mary locked eyes with Margaret, who appeared to be wrestling with her own reflections. The moment felt sacred, a bridge built not only between them but resonating throughout the entire room. Despite the honesty and courage it required, Mary felt a creeping sensation of empowerment lace through her resolve. This was her opportunity to redefine not just her relationships, but her very sense of self. What would she discover in this uncharted territory, where every revelation could crack open the facade she had unintentionally cemented? A whisper of doubt nudged at her resolve, but she recognized this as the byproduct of true growth, an inherent part of pushing boundaries. It was clear that the choice before them wasn't merely about bearing their truths, but about embracing the unpredictability that came with it. Cautiously, Thomas raised his hand again, his face a portrait of contemplation. "What if we find that we do not want to embrace what S revealed?" he inquired, echoing back the weight of her invitation with a tremor of fear. Mary felt a flicker of frustration but also empathy. Fear had a way of underpinning rational thought, binding individuals in streaks of self-protection. "Then we learn," she countered, tapping into her burgeoning strength. "Learning means growing even when it's uncomfortable. We may not like what we uncover, but isn't it more painful to continue living under a false sense of security? What is hidden begins to rot, while clarity breeds connection." The room stirred once more, the tension thickening into a palpable electric possibility. A challenge had been laid bare, one demanding each person confront not just their perceived shortcomings, but the darker nuances of their identities. A deep inhale filled her lungs, tracing the contours of a decision that weighed heavily, yet felt unavoidable. Mary considered what she had already discovered within herself: an ability to lead with empathy, to bring others into the light of their truths, and to slowly carve out her own healthier boundaries. The empowerment she felt countered the specter of doubt, channeling her thoughts systematically into how she could guide this conversation without losing herself in the process. As she moved to address the group again, she sensed a physical change within herself, as if each step punctuated her conviction. "It may feel like unearthing a battleground today, but if we can navigate through this rigged landscape together, we might emerge with a stronger sense of ourselves and what truly matters." This moment can turn the fear of loss into a celebration of discovery. The air was charged with an intimate vulnerability that Mary realized had seldom been present in their conversations. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. She needed to hold on to that feeling, to wrap it around herself like armor. But as she sought to sustain the momentum, an unsettling thought gripped her heart, a persistent echo of the fears lurking in the shadows. Was she truly prepared for the fallout of this commitment to authenticity? What if not everyone was ready to embrace their truths, or worse, what if her own revelations were not what she hoped them to be? "Let us take a moment," Mary proposed, her voice trembling yet steadied with determination. "Let us each write down one truth we've been afraid to confront or share. I believe this will help us guide our discussion and prepare the space for what lies ahead." As pens met paper, Mary couldn't shake off the nagging anxiety threading through her mind. What had she just initiated? This was more than an open conversation. It was a lived experience demanding honest introspection from each of them. While the potential for healing existed, so did the possibility of painful realizations. And just as that thought solidified, the pens paused, a silence enveloping them that darkened the air like the clenching grip of fate. What would these discoveries reveal? And would she have the strength to stand firm when the truth threatened to unravel the delicate fabric they had woven together all these years? Mary's breath hitched as she awaited the ripples of honesty to surface, knowing that this journey she had instigated could lead her to a precipice where the only way out was through into the depths of human complexity. Would she dare to navigate that storm if it arose? Or would she falter when faced with the daunting truths of not just others, but her own? The stakes had never been this high, and as the questions hung in the air, she felt the sharp pull of destiny awaiting her response. As the pens clattered down onto the tables, the atmosphere transformed into a dense blanket of anticipation. Mary felt each passing second push the weight of her own unspoken truths deeper into her consciousness. The fragility of this collective act of sharing made her restless. She needed to navigate this moment with precision, as if walking on a tightrope suspended over an abyss of vulnerability. She glanced around the room, and her gaze lingered on Thomas, whose anxious fingers drummed lightly against the surface. What was he grappling with? The grid lines of each participant's mind flashed before her like a chaotic map filled with untapped emotions and secrets that had been buried too deeply for far too long. Okay, let us start with sharing what we wrote, she encouraged, her voice steady, yet inside she was a tangle of nerves. Each confession felt like a key, one that unlocked the doors to brighter, albeit stormier paths. What awaited on the other side was anyone's guess, but she was more determined than ever to step through. Margaret went first, her voice trembling as she shared her fear of being unlovable. Mary sensed the collective intake of breath. Each word was a thread pulling the group closer together, a tapestry of fears that could either bind them in understanding or shatter them into irreparable pieces. As Margaret's voice reached its climax, Mary's heart raced. She felt a strange mixture of admiration and trepidation. The sight of another person's vulnerability ignited something within her, a fierce desire to face her own truths. For all the strength she had summoned to lead this group, she was painfully aware that she hadn't done the same for herself yet. "Thank you for sharing that, Margaret," she replied, each syllable steeped in earnestness. "You are brave for speaking what many of us have also felt. I can relate. There was a time I believed I wasn't worth loving either." The room hung on her words, and it felt as if air were crackling with newfound electricity. As her admission sank in, Mary felt a shift inside herself. By connecting her experience of fear to Margaret's, she was already down a path of self-discovery. One by one, each member took the plunge, unraveling their confessions as they soared from their inner thoughts. Secrets spilled into the open like ink on parchment, inevitably coloring the conversations ahead. There was laughter amidst tears, release amid anxiety, and a growing fortitude in the camaraderie that grew with each honesty revealed. But the deeper the conversation delved, the more Mary felt her pulse quicken with personal intimidation. They were carving paths through one another's pain, and with each word shared, the burden of her own truth loomed heavier. What was she hiding? And more critically, was she ready to share the deep-seated fears she had shielded herself from for so long? Then Thomas spoke, his voice halting. "I've always feared I'm not good enough at my job," he confessed, "that I'm a fraud who will be exposed at any moment." His vulnerability sparked a ripple of murmurs, faces revealing recognition and empathy. At that moment, Mary understood that each individual carried the weight of unworthiness, a universal ailment that often went unacknowledged in everyday conversations. "Isn't that ironic?" she interjected, taking in the room's reactions. "The more we hide, the more we realize just how many of us feel this way. What if we shifted this narrative? Instead of viewing these truths as weaknesses, what if we began to see them as a shared bond of our humanity?" But amidst the bravery, a gnawing doubt continued to claw at her mind. What essence of herself was she prepared to expose? What if she uncovered not inspiration, but the dark corners of her own insecurities, ones she had fought to bury? The emotional weight of it all squeezed her heart as the turn for her confession drew closer. Each name was called, every sentiment ricocheting off the walls and wrapping around her like a veil. The moment she prepared was suddenly escalating into a confrontation, a moment that could inflict wounds she wasn't certain she had healed from. As Mary felt her breath catch in her throat, a decision loomed. Would she dare to disclose her own battles, or would she retreat? The time for her truth was inching ever closer. A heart-stopping precipice that could redefine everything she had so earnestly built within herself. There it was, the fine line between transformation and vulnerability, waiting to be crossed. As her name quivered on the eve of departure into honesty, a pang of clarity surged through her. Embracing this moment may very well be the path to reclaiming her power. But would she exhibit the courage to leap? Or would she falter at the edge? The answers beckoned her like distant echoes, teasing her sanity and spirit. The stakes had never been higher. What awaited Mary once the last shard of her truth spilled forth into the open air? As Mary's name hung in the air, a cacophony of emotions surged through her, leaving her heart racing and her palms clammy against the smooth surface of the table. She had cultivated an image of confidence, a facade that masked the shadows of self-doubt lurking just beneath the surface. The revelation that lay before her felt monumental, not just the act of revealing her fears, but the realization that her truth could illuminate parts of herself she had kept in darkness for far too long. Mary, the facilitator's gentle voice broke her reverie, nudging her toward the inevitable. This was it. This wasn't merely about vulnerability, it was an act of courage, one that could recalibrate her identity within this new space she was carving for herself. She drew in a deep breath, steadying her resolve. Her voice wavered, a mere whisper against the unlikely backdrop of her resolving thoughts. I've always feared that my past defines me. The words felt foreign, raw, yet uncannily liberating as they danced on her tongue. As her confession unfolded, she could see faces shifting, a collective engagement urging her on. I've always worried that the decisions I made, those mistakes, really would overshadow any accomplishments I might achieve. A murmur of recognition rippled through the group. There it was again, the universal thread of unworthiness. With every person who shared, Mary ingrained a lesson. Their honesty wasn't a weakness, but rather a mosaic of strength that could forge connections. I spent years feeling trapped by my choices. I felt like a shadow of the person I wanted to be. She hesitated, but the warmth radiating from her peers spurred her on. I thought that if I admitted my flaws, I would be unlovable, lost in judgment. As she continued, something shifted within her. The fears that once loomed like dark clouds began to dissipate, a soft glow of understanding took their place. It was as if each confession created a ripple effect, releasing burdens both strange and familiar. Mary began to realize she wasn't the only one clinging to past missteps, the legacy of moments that had long defined them. When she finished, the air hung heavy with anticipation, a silence laden with empathy. Thomas offered her a tentative smile, a flicker of admiration perhaps. "That was really brave, Mary," he said, prompting a murmured consensus from the others. Their admiration was palpable, but instead of basking in it, Mary was struck with a sudden clarity about her next steps. A wave of determination surged through her. This shared courage sparked a yearning within to uplift not just her own narrative, but the others as well. Recognizing their vulnerabilities made her instinctively want to guide them through their uncertainties, to help untangle their fears and claim their narratives as a source of strength. "So what if we were to create a space for just us?" she suggested, her voice gaining confidence. "A space to explore these themes further, supportive yet honest, where we could challenge the fears that hold us back and foster growth." New possibilities ignited in her mind. Could she transform this moment of shared vulnerability into a platform for deeper personal development? But as excitement pulsed through her veins, another question loomed ominously: did she possess the skills to facilitate that type of environment? Could she be the anchor while grappling with her own unsteady waves? The thought was both thrilling and petrifying. "Let us meet again next week, and we can plan the next steps," Thomas suggested, catalyzing nods around the table. His words were punctuated by the promise of continuation, drawing the group closer together. As they wrapped up the session, Mary felt a burgeoning hope. This wasn't just about unveiling pain. It was about weaving a new narrative that embraced both flaws and triumphs. Yet, in the recesses of her mind lingered the inquiries that could tilt her freshly constructed resolve. What awaited her on the road of this newfound venture? Would her fears resurface like ghosts on the periphery? As they stood to leave, Mary cast one last glance at the faces around her, each marked by unspoken histories and burgeoning potential. She realized she was on the brink of something transformative that could reshape who she was destined to become. But the true question echoed back within: the time had come. Would she lead them into this labyrinth of introspection, or fall back into a comfort defined by her past? As she walked out of the room, the weight of uncertainty clung to her, a shaky promise of revelation to come. The first week after that transformative session felt both electrifying and suffocating. Mary awoke each morning with a swirl of possibility and dread clinging to her like an unwanted second skin. The prospect of leading her peers in a supportive group weighed heavily on her, but beneath that burden, a flickering flame of excitement burned. She had witnessed firsthand the power of shared vulnerability, and yet the thought of stepping into the role of facilitator terrified her. Each day she found herself jotting down ideas, strategies, and themes for their next meeting. The notepad became her refuge, a tangible anchor in moments where her confidence faltered. She discovered hidden enthusiasm within her, a kind of determination she hadn't acknowledged before. Wielding her pencil, she began to structure the themes based on her own revelations. Letting go of the past, the importance of self-acceptance, and recognizing the shared human experience of failure. But as she wrote, doubts gnawed at her. What if she failed to create the connection she envisioned? The specter of inadequacy whispering incessantly, unsettling her newfound resolve. It would be easy to slip back into the shadows, allowing her insecurities to dictate her potential. The echoes of past criticisms surfaced like unwanted ghosts. Would they find her messing it all up? At the same time, those doubts became a crucible, refining her focus and turning her anxiety into resolve. That Saturday, Mary took a deep breath before entering the familiar conference room filled with eager faces. The air was thick with potential as she stood at the front, her heart thumping almost audibly in her ears. "Thank you all for coming," she started, her voice quaking initially but finding steadiness as she spoke. "I invited you here today because, like all of you, I seek connection. I've realized that our pasts don't define us, but rather how we respond to them shapes who we become." The group listened intently as Mary went on to share her vision. An open exchange of thoughts in a safe environment where vulnerability was met with support, honesty, and empathy. The initial trepidation that curled around her like a vine began to relax. This was her moment of transformation. She was stepping out of her shadows and embracing uncertainty, just as she had asked others to do. As discussions flowed, Mary was amazed at the rich dialogue that rippled around the room. She felt herself facilitating rather than dictating, urging others to share. And in those moments, she discovered unexpected strengths within her: a natural listener, an interpreter of human complexities, a mediator of fears. The realization that she made others comfortable enough to express their emotions sparked a new warmth within her. "Can we talk about the hardest choices we've had to make?" someone suggested, shifting the conversation to deeper waters. It was as if a dam had broken. One by one, stories flowed like an open river. Each shared vulnerability reinforced a collective actuality. Everyone had carried burdens that seemed insurmountable at times. Mary listened, absorbing their narratives, and found each story reflecting aspects of her own. The bond she yearned for blossomed, and with it came a perspective shift. She was not merely a facilitator. She was becoming a tapestry woven from shared experiences. But as the meeting drew to a close, a small but persistent thread of anxiety wormed back into her mind. What if the group dynamic could shift at any moment? What if someone became withdrawn or resistant next time? Would she be able to navigate that emotional terrain again? Mary left the meeting empowered yet acutely aware of her fragility. A tender emergence of identity had begun, but she questioned how resilient she might be when faced with true challenges from herself or others. As she stepped out into the crisp evening air, she realized that while this was a victory, the journey had only just begun, and a new defining moment awaited her. But would she have the insight to explore the deeper conflicts that could destabilize their fragile group? That question lingered in her mind as she stumbled into an unexpected encounter: a figure from her past, striding toward her with a look that promised unresolved tension. Mary's heart raced anew. Would this confrontation reveal further depths of her journey, or threaten to unravel all that she was beginning to build? As Mary stood face to face with her father, the weight of the past crashed over her like a tidal wave. The silk dress she wore felt heavier than ever, now drenched in the rush of emotions erupting from their unexpected encounter. Decades had marked their separation, and yet here he was, an embodiment of the choices that once haunted her. "Mary," his voice wavered, laden with regret. "I never meant for things to end up this way." She clenched her fists, feeling the fabric of the gown prick against her skin, echoes of confinement from years spent seeking freedom from his expectations. This man, wrapped in privilege and abandonment, was the catalyst for many of her insecurities. The journey she had undertaken to forge her own identity collided with the tumultuous memories he represented. "Do you think an expensive dress can bridge the gap of lost years?" she asked sharply, the words carrying the bitterness and volatility of her hidden frustrations. A mixture of disbelief and vulnerability coursed through her, making it difficult to navigate the storm brewing within. "I came back to make amends," he murmured, the sincerity in his voice surprising her. "I want to be a part of your life." But Mary felt the familiar grasp of skepticism take hold. Her own transformation had brought clarity, a desire for authenticity that contradicted the very things he represented. Could she trust him with the pieces of her life she had so meticulously constructed? Your absence taught me resilience, she stated with fierce conviction. I fought too hard to reshape my identity around the shadows you left behind. I won't allow this dress to define my worth or my story. If you came seeking forgiveness, you'll find that it's rooted in understanding, not in riches. The rendezvous grew dark around them, a stark contrast to the vibrant connections she had recently cultivated with her support group. Her father's face fell, the understanding dawning within his eyes as he realized just how much she had evolved. Mary took several measured steps back, taking the emotional high ground as she peered at the man who once embodied her past failures. In his eyes she saw hope, perhaps not just for him but also for herself. What if this encounter became a pivotal inflection point in reshaping definitions of family, especially for her children who were always brimming with possibility? Perhaps there's room for a new beginning, just not based on what you can provide financially. She softened her tone, but her gaze remained steady. Let us start with honesty. If you want to be a part of this family, then dig deep and share your truth. Only then can we think about accepting each other. He hesitated, taking a deep breath as if to capture the intention behind her words. I understand. I truly do. The vulnerability in his admission stirred a sense of cautious hope within her. Their connection was still frail, but this time she felt armed with the strength she cultivated, a woman capable of facilitating change, rather than being swept away by it. In that moment, the silk she wore transformed from a burden into a symbol of her journey. Her father's tentative step forward began to mirror her own willingness to embrace the complexities of their shared past. Let us take it slow. I won't promise immediate acceptance, but I can promise honesty. As they embarked on this uncertain path, Mary felt a twinge of newfound confidence blossom within her. She was no longer a passive participant in her life story, dictated by her family's history. She stood at a crossroads, not just as a daughter, but as an architect of her own voice and legacy. Weeks later, as Mary watched Jake and Jessica conquer their new life together, a surge of pride enveloped her. She realized the inner work she had committed to foster a healthier dynamic had not only transformed her relationships, but also buoyed her self-worth. In open conversations with her father, they had come to understand each other layer by layer, revealing the power of vulnerability and the beauty of second chances. At their next support group meeting, against the backdrop of laughter and acceptance, Mary shared the journey of reconciliation. As she opened up about her father, the group leaned in, captivated. It was not merely about her past but embodied the essence of growth, one that encouraged mutual healing. In each revelation exchanged, she witnessed her peers absorbing validation for their own struggles. With each interaction they crafted a narrative of courage and resilience, building a community they would cherish moving forward. For once, Mary wasn't solely rattled by her father's judgment. She reveled in the satisfaction of her newfound clarity, the depth of her worth unshackled from the remnants of her past. What had once loomed heavy transformed into a dress woven not just of fabric, but of perseverance, authenticity, and restored connections. She had embraced her past, shaped her identity, established her presence, and recognized her competency as a family member, and in individual achievements solidified through tangible experiences. As Mary took a moment to breathe in the promise of the future, she knew this chapter of her life was firmly grounded in understanding, connection, and empowerment. They had all dared to explore their truths, and in that shared space, they unearthed relationships that transcended past grievances. Now it was her time to shine, to lean into all that she had become, a woman no longer defined by the weight of her inheritance, but rather by the strength she had struggled to cultivate. Embrace authenticity, for it paves the way to transformation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.